Cameras are now rolling in Boston, 107 of them to be exact. We're talking about police body cameras, which are now on 100 officers who were randomly assigned the devices after a judge overruled union objections and said the trial program could go forward. The other 7 cameras are on members of the Boston Police Command staff, like Chief William Gross, who is seen here showing how the camera works. Cameras like these are expected to be turned on whenever the officers interact with civilians and shouldn't be turned off until the situation is resolved. Department policy requires officers to have permission to take video when they're in a private residence unless they have a warrant. Now, a little background. As I said, the union agreed to a voluntary program, but then not one officer actually volunteered. When the department said it would go forward with 100 randomly selected officers, the union tried to stop the pilot program in court, but Friday the judge gave the department the go-ahead. Boston Police Commissioner Bill Evans joins me now. Commissioner, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
You assigned the 100 cameras yesterday?
They started yesterday. We assigned them about a week and a half ago. The officers got trained up for a couple of days, but we rolled it out. First day yesterday, they had them on.
How are those who had them on? How are they reacting after this battle between you and
you know, I know they were in use yesterday. There was a couple of situations. I read some of the reports this morning that they actually, you know, recorded some interactions. And so, you know, I think they're going to accept it, Jim. And like I've said, it's new technology, and change doesn't come easy to any organization.
How hard was it sitting in a courtroom for 2 days with the head of the union that represents the men and women who I know used to be one of them, who you feel so close to, and essentially in this high-profile battle?
Tough. It's tough. You know, my heart's always in the job. I came up through the ranks, and you know, but you know what? Deep down, it wasn't personal, Jim. It was business. It's something the community wanted. It was something Mayor Walsh wanted, and all we're asking here was for a pilot to look at the pros and cons. And so it was difficult, and you know, even when we won, you know, I was asked, are you happy with the victory? It wasn't a victory. It was, you know, going forward and getting this program off the ground.
You know, inside, we invited the union president on, as we have regularly here, and we never even get a response to our emails. So if he chooses to join us anytime, we'd like to have him. You know, we speak to you every month on Boston Public Radio. I know how hard you work to create a bond between the police in this city and its community members, its residents. This has to do damage. When people turn on a television and say, what do you say to a woman who comes up to you tomorrow and says, I thought you wanted to work with us. I just saw on television that the cops who you command don't even want accountability.
Well, and that's the message continually throughout this process I try to send, Jim, was, you know, it was the union, and it was the union only. It wasn't the men and women out there who were walking the beat. I think for the most part, the union said it. They were for this, and I think most of the guys were for it. And the problem I had, Jim, is it sent the message that we're hiding something. And, you know, and the longer we were fighting it, the more people think that, you know, we're doing some bad things out there. And I tried to say, we're not perfect, but I think we're doing great.
So you think that if the union had not put out the word, apparently, did not volunteer, you think the actual cops on the beat here were supportive of this, that their union leadership was in a different place?
I think so. I really do.
So was it bad faith when they've agreed to a voluntary program and then urged people not to volunteer?
Well, I think there was some infighting there, honestly. I think you're dealing, obviously, with, you know, an older House of Representatives who probably aren't with the technology like the younger guys are, but you know, you're naive to not pay attention to what's going across the country, and it's going to be a necessary part of policing.
You know, Boston in many ways is seen as the home of innovation, but you know, there was a story in the Globe the other day about how your predecessor, Ed Davis, people before that, have impossible task to do virtually anything. A mediation program attempting to deal with modest complaints for speed and efficiency reasons. No cooperation on that. What, it went a decade before it was ultimately implemented. What's the problem? I mean, what's the systemic problem?
Well, I think, Jim, it's change, you know, and I think sometimes they think that we always have a motive to sort of get them a little bit. The whole idea of the mediation was an option for them not to go the usual internal affairs, but come in and speak to the complainant, and together maybe tell their story and come to a conclusion that, you know, it was just a misunderstanding. It was for minor offenses, but somehow, you know, I think they think that that was going to be somehow detrimental. And I've said, hey, that's not what it's all about. It's to resolve these cases to the satisfaction of both parties.
So how frustrated are you?
You know, I see the great work they do out there, Jim. You know, they're taking guns off the street, the crime rate, you know, our positive, you know, when we take these polls, we're doing a super job.
Yeah, but you gotta be, as a human being, you gotta be. I mean, I assume there are other projects you're trying to implement that you're having problems?
Yeah.
Are there?
Well, there is.
Like what?
Well, you know, little things like, you know, you know, trying to put name tags. You know, I've been trying to get names.
You can't put name tags on your officers?
You know, that's one of the things I'm bargaining with them right now on. And, you know, the superior officers have them. My command staff has them, but, you know, I'm working to get them on.
What's the argument against having a name tag?
Again, it's a changing conditions, Jim.
Can we change gears for a second? Last night, Sean Ellis was here, who a couple of decades ago was convicted of killing a police detective, Boston police detective, John Mulligan, who you knew. The SJC just confirmed a lower court decision overturning the conviction, ordering a new trial, a fourth trial. As I say, you knew Detective Mulligan. What was your reaction to the verdict?
You know, I've gotten to know John's family, and so for their family, I'm really hurting for. You know, and I hate to see any officer who basically was assassinated on the street, whether, you know, the court thinks what's right and what's wrong, but as a police officer, you know, we take it personally. My thoughts go out to the family, and, you know, I'm glad Dan Connolly's going to retry, because there's a lot of evidence there, I think, that can tie him to the gun. But
there even evidence, well, tie him to the gun,
Right.
There's no question. The SJC said that. But there's a lot of evidence that there were, and this is basis for the overturning, that there were corrupt cops.
Right.
And that Mulligan was, I mean, does that not convince?
It bothers me. It bothers me completely. But still, someone has to be held accountable for his death. And I know the family's grieving. They have since they lost their loved one. And, you know, we got to somehow get to the truth. There's some positive stuff that ties him to the gun, but there's some negative. I understand.
Are you convinced that Sean Ellis is guilty as charged?
You know, it was 25 years ago, Jim. I didn't sit on the trial. But you know what? I know Dan Connolly. If Dan Connolly believes there's enough evidence and he can be convicted, and, you know, for John Mulligan's family, you know, I'm sure all of us believe there's enough to retry him.
Rosemary Scapicchia, who's the lead lawyer representing Sean Ellis, as I said, was also here last night, and she had some pretty tough words for a couple of prior commissioners. I'd like you to listen to it, if you would.
Boston Police Department knew that they had corrupt police officers working on this case.
You mean the brass we're talking about?
They knew.
Who?
The commissioner himself.
Who was the commissioner then?
It was Bratton.
Bratton and then Evans.
And then Evans. But when Bratton put together his 50 of the Boston's finest to do this investigation, he knew that Walter Robinson had already been under investigation for ripping off a drug dealer together with Mulligan. And he withheld that information for 22 years. Well, we're calling for an investigation as to how and why. Now that we know.
By whom?
By either the U.S. Attorney's Office, the Attorney General's Office, or the Governor's Office.
Since there was corruption, should there be an investigation here?
Well, again, it's 25 years ago. You know, if, you know, someone wants to take that on, Jim, but, you know, I know this attorney here, and, you know, she's been fighting our department for years. So,
well, she won this case.
She won the case. I understand.
How do you feel when you, I mean, by the way, last night I apologize. It confused you and your brother.
You know, I hate
when you hear her talking about your brother that way, what's your reaction?
Well, it bothers me because I know my brother. No one was more ethical. No one had this department to high standards, and she can take shots at him all she wants because he's not here to defend him. But I know my brother. If there were corrupt cops, he would have taken care of it. But, you know, she has always battled the police. And, you know, I knew John Mulligan. God bless him. I knew the good John Mulligan. I hate to see, again, a guy who's dead be kicked to the ground by someone like her.
Can we, before you leave, Commissioner, this is a pilot program, getting back to the body camera thing. You told us on the radio your hope is that it becomes permanent eventually. The judge in this case cited something called the Commissioner's Statute that gives you the power from 1962 to decide what cops wear, what weapons are issued, how they're deployed. If you do want a permanent program, right?
Right.
Do you believe you have the unilateral power without negotiating with the union to implement that permanent program?
Well, I'm not sure, Jim. I'm sure that even with this decision, they're going to grieve it and go to an arbitrator. I'm hoping this stands, so down the road, I hope, you know, I can have more power. I mean, I talked about how sometimes difficult it is to bring progress to this department, but collective bargaining was here long before I got here, and unfortunately, I have to deal with it.
Is this part of the negotiations going on, collective bargaining going on right now with the cops?
I'm not sure. It's already started, but I'm not sure if we're talking about body cameras.
But there will be a permanent program if Commissioner Evans has his way.
Well, again, Jim, this is a pilot, and I think, you know, it's all about the cost benefit. But I think the cops are definitely going to see the benefits, and I think, in that case, I'm all for it.
Commissioner Evans, thank you so much for
Thank
your
you.
time, as always. I appreciate it.